Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is a former co-CEO at Chipotle Mexican Grill. He took a Denver-based burrito company to Fortune 500 status. To build a successful culture, he spent most of his time having one-on-one conversations with more than 20,000 employees at Chipotle. The result was a culture of empowerment where each person was rewarded and promoted for how effective they were in making the people around them better. Prior to joining Chipotle, he was the head of litigation and then managing partner and CEO at the Denver-based law firm, Messner and Reeves, LLC, which he led for 10 years. He is currently working on an up-and-coming documentary series that's about to be released on PBS station nationally called Connected, A Search for Unity. His name is Monty Moran. This episode is the first part of the conversation with Monty. We'll focus on how Monty started his career in law and how he developed his management philosophy. Welcome to the show, Monty.
It's great to be here, Grace.
I have to say, after listening to your book on Audible, I get the sense that you are someone who really care about people. You essentially reinvent how your law firm operate and applied the same management philosophy to Chipotle. From being a lawyer to a leader, there are a lot of great lessons could be helping many of our audiences. To start off the show, I want to hear your version of the story of how you started.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much of the story you want, so feel free to interrupt me anytime. But I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and I had wonderful parents. My dad was a cell biologist, as I mentioned in the book. My mom was a psychologist, and both of them were very, very interested in talking about all things spiritual, all things geographic, all things biological. They were really interested in the world and the people in it. They were not interested in politics. I never heard them talking about politics, or very, very seldom heard them talking about politics. They weren't interested in the television. They weren't interested in media. They didn't have magazines. They didn't have normal media magazines around the house. They had National Geographic. And my dad had the Falconry Association books, the North American Falconers Association book, NAFA, and because he was really into falconry. And they read lots and lots of books, but they were always books on either spirituality or something specific that they wanted to learn. Like my dad was reading about woodworking, or he'd read about making knives or making musical instruments, or and a lot of falconry stuff. So they were really interested sort of in the physical world and being part of it. They did lots of hiking and sports and tennis, and we went cross-country skiing all the time. And so we were a very outdoorsy family, lots of camping, lots of being outdoors. And so it's funny, I grew up watching almost no television. So when I was in school, people would talk about, oh, did you see this? Did you see that on TV? And I was always the guy who's like, no, I don't even know that show. So I grew up, watching very little television. And it was a wonderful upbringing. Grew up in the mountains outside of Boulder, Colorado. And we had lots of animals, lots and lots and lots of animals. My dad had pigeons and hawks and ferrets, which is a long animal like a giant weasel. And let's see, we had dogs and cats, and we had at one point llamas, and oh my gosh, so many more animals. We had a magpie, a bird that actually lived in the house, flying around, totally wild. It was actually well. Anyway, so and my dad was a very, very great musician. So he played lots of musical instruments. He had band over to his house every Wednesday night. They'd play music together. So I grew up with a lot of music in the house. And my parents, every night we'd have dinner, and they'd light candles. And it was always we'd have dinner as a family together every night. My dad would shove the phone in the drawer so it couldn't interrupt us. And we'd have these very sort of solemn dinners every night as a family. Lots of candles. My parents had a very romantic relationship. They would tell each other they loved each other all the time. It felt like a very warm place to be in my family. So that's the kind of upbringing I had. Now, that's not the whole story because there were difficulties, of course. My father was a brilliant man. He was a cell biologist who was a professor at the University of Colorado, Denver. He had gone to Princeton undergraduate school, and then he went to Brown for his PhD, and then he went to Harvard for his postdoctoral fellowship. And at Harvard met and became great friends with a Dr. Keith Porter, who was coming out to the University of Colorado to set up the Porter Bioscience. There's a building named after him now called Porter Biosciences here at CU. And my dad came out with him to be part of CU because my dad always wanted to escape New York. My dad lived in New York, growing up in New York, and did not like it and hated the city. And my dad was actually, in many ways, a bit of a loner. He didn't like, he loved people individually, but he didn't like, humanity. He didn't like traffic and waiting in line. And he hated shopping. He was actually wanted to live in a teepee, like an American Indian. He always talked about wanting to be like a Native American, living in a teepee. And that's what he really wanted. And he actually had a teepee in his backyard for the last 20 years of his life. And he'd go back there and he had drums and all. He was really interested in shamanic stuff. And so, yeah, it was a very interesting family to grow up in.
Wow, that's really interesting. I feel like you love people. You chatted with homeless people outside of Dairy Queen, and you spoke with all your employees. Sounds like you were almost the opposite of your dad.
Oh yeah, my dad loved individual people. It's funny. I think I've got a huge amount in common with my dad. But I am more social for sure. You're absolutely right. I mean, my dad was very social one-on-one with one person or two people. And I love being with one person or two people. I like the intimacy of being with one person. In fact, I would say that my relationship with humanity is sort of one person at a time. Although sometimes many people at a table, but when I look at each one, I feel like this huge connection with that one person, and then a huge connection with another person. And I don't feel like when I move my connection from one person to the next that I forget about the other person. So, but it's interesting. There was an intensity about my father, which made him a bit intimidating. And I'm told that there's an intensity about me that sometimes people say that's a bit intimidating. I guess I am very intense. I'm not a person who, if I'm paying attention, I'm paying like a lot of attention, I'm really listening. And I'm not just listening because I think words are basically totally misleading and generally unhelpful. When the words somebody speaks are only a very small part of what I'm actually gleaning from them when I interact with them. So there's, hundreds of thousands of little judgments going on, just like there are between any two people. You're looking at whether they're smiling or frowning, whether they're sitting forward or leaning back, whether they're excited or bored. I always notice it when you see a lot of things, people like giving a speech at the beginning, maybe they're a leader in a company and they say, yeah, I'm really excited about what we've got going on. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not excited at all, so don't even talk about it. Find something you are excited about. Talk about that. But anyway, yeah, so that I find fascinating is communicating with people. And when I communicate with people, I think it's, being with them, just actually being with them is where the vast majority of the communication arises, not from the words. The words are just a little almost distracting part of the conversation with somebody.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You're one of the very few people I feel like have a really high EQ. I heard many successful founders try to focus on the numbers instead of the product and services. And then they realized that it turned out to be a big mistake. You did the opposite by spending time, have conversations with people at Chipotle, going undercover to the management training program. Those stories are amazing, and the fundamentals are really resonating with me.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's funny. If you think about thinking about money, talking about money, wishing for more money, loving money. All of these things are entirely ineffective if what you want is money. You won't get money by doing those things. You won't get money by talking about money, thinking about money, adding up numbers, doing spreadsheets. None of those things make money. It's like even if you're an investor in the stock market, How do you make money in the stock market? Well, I guess you could say, well, you pick winners. Okay, you pick winners. How do you pick a winner? You don't pick a winner by watching what goes up every day, right? Because if you watch what goes up every day, you didn't invest in it yet and you missed the boat. Mm-hmm. You have to pick a winner. Well, how do you pick a winner? You find companies that do something really well that you think a lot of people are going to want and that you think are going to grow and grow and grow such that even more people want their services, and perhaps a company that's going to create more and more and more services that more and more people want. So if it were Apple Computer 20 years ago, you could have done a lot worse than to invest in Apple Computer. Why would you invest in it? Because it's like, wow, these are cool devices they're making. I like their laptop. And then later on, maybe I love the iPhone. It's better than the other phones. If you thought that was a great product, if you thought people were going to love it, and you decided, I'm going to invest in what they're doing, and I'm going to invest in why they're doing what they're doing and what their philosophy is, because that philosophy is what's going to cause them to continue to do it well in the future. Mm-hmm. You could invest in it. And then you can watch it every day if you want. You can talk about the money you're making and you can do spreadsheets, but that's not where the money came from. The money came from the excellent decision in investing in a company that's got their shit together to more or less.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think those are like great philosophy that everyone kind of ignores. So like I've heard about like a lot of younger people talking about like, oh, I want to achieve a certain standard. Like, for example, I want to turn like, I want to raise this amount of money or blah, 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 or I want to get on this list or something. And like, I feel like those are really bad measurement they're
terrible. I always say a lot of people come to me now, lots and lots of people, hundreds or more than hundreds come to me. Hey, would you be willing to invest in my company? When somebody comes to me and one of the first things they're talking about is how they're going to make lots of money and they're in a very, very small stage, they're in an early stage, I almost always think, oh, that's a huge red flag. If somebody comes to me and says, we're going to make this incredible product, which is going to change the world. Okay, I'm going to listen. Or if somebody's going to say, hey, we've got this service we're going to provide that's going to make people's lives better or make the world a better place or clean up the environment in a way that's really effective, whatever. If people are passionate about accomplishing something worthwhile, then I think I'll be interested, right? Or I'll listen. I think though that the people who come at life as young people now, a lot of people come into the world, or don't come into the world, but as they're raised through high school and college, they come out of college and they decide, okay, I want to make money. How am I going to do that? It's exactly the wrong way of thinking about things, in my opinion. I want to make money is like, okay, well, who cares that you want to make money? That's not interesting. Everyone, given the choice of having more money or less money, would choose more money. So that makes you not interesting. So I think you have to ask, well, what is interesting about you, or what are you interested in? What kind of thing would you like to be part of? What kind of thing would you like to create? How can you help people? And I think that's the biggest question. How can you help people? What is it about Grace Gong that can help people? And well, you decide, okay, I think that I'm really interested in doing a podcast, or I'm really interested in writing books, or I'm interested in whatever it is but what is it that you can do to help people? And if you really ask that question with true interest in helping people or helping animals or helping the environment, or it could be that you just want to build beautiful sculptures and you think that maybe that's a way of helping people because they can look at your beautiful artwork. But what can you as a human being produce, create, invent that's interesting, that you love to do, that won't feel like work? And people who go at life and focus on those things, well, ironically, they tend to make a lot of money, ironically, but they also tend to really enjoy what they do, and therefore they do more of it, and they don't consider it work, and they don't feel stressed out, and they don't go, man, my work-life balance is out of whack. You read what I wrote about work-life balance, right? Dumbest concept.
One of your management philosophy is, in terms of hiring, you focus on people that are driven, who is self-motivator, who is a good person, because you think the skills can be trained, but the fundamentals of a person and the drive cannot be trained. Curious, does this strategy only work for Chipotle? Because I feel like maybe it's hard to implement at a place like the law firm. You are a lawyer by training. Law school took many years and you gain quote unquote technical skills. If someone come to a law firm with no technical training, but they're a good person, I feel like it's going to cost a lot to train them. where I'm going with this is if I'm a startup founder, I'm no Google, don't have the budget to be picky, how do I select or train my employees?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think, you asked kind of a few different things there, but how are you, let's start with the last question you asked. How are you going to attract great talent if you're a startup and you don't have a lot of money? Well, I think the answer is with a great vision and with your own huge reservoir of enthusiasm about that vision. So if you want to build, and, I'm just thinking about some of the companies that exist today, take like Instagram, if you wanted to invent Instagram, and I'm not even qualified to talk about anything high tech like this because I'm so low tech and I'm not even a social media guy, but you might say, I've got this, or even Facebook back in the day, oh my gosh, I've got this. I love the idea of connecting people on this Facebook thing and we can all like learn about each other and we can have this way of communicating through these neat new, this internet thing that just was kind of recently came out because back when they started Facebook, the internet was rather new and maybe not so known to people. So it gave a way of people using that to really connect with each other and understand each other and say things and express themselves. And when that first started, I'm sure there was all this excitement about, hey, this could be huge. We could connect the whole world this way. And then if you get a few people in the room and go, guys or gals, hey, folks, come, friends, whatever it is, your friends that you're closest to. Maybe you think they're really bright. Hey, Grace, I want you to help me with this. Guess what I think we can do? We can change the whole world by helping people connect and unite, and it'll be great because we'll help people find lost loved ones. We'll help people share what's important to them and maybe find other friends that they wouldn't have otherwise met. And God, it's going to be amazing. Will you join me in helping to do this? I don't have any money, but we can do this together. And then if it's really successful, obviously we'll be in Fat City. It'll be great. Well, you might be like, yeah, I understand your vision. I love that vision. I want to be part of that vision. And that's how most great startups happen. I want to be part of what you're doing. I want to be part of what you are seeing, your vision. In fact, now it's not your vision anymore, Monty. I share your vision. Now it's my vision, and so now it's you and me, Grace. We're going to build Facebook. And then you have a friend. Well, Monty, I have this friend who's brilliant, who would love this. Can I get them involved? Yes, Grace, get them involved. Oh, okay. It's my friend Charles. Okay. Well, Charles would really love this. We sit down, we talk to Charles. We have this vision. Charles goes, oh my God, that's such an awesome vision. And it becomes not your vision, Grace, not my vision, Monty, but it becomes Charles's vision. And now Charles is on board, So it's like, if you find people who want to do what you're doing, believe in what you're doing, and in fact, believe in it so much that it's not what you're doing anymore, it's what they're doing. Well, guess what? Money doesn't matter to them because they're building something that they want to be part of, that they believe in, that they think will be great, that they think will be huge. And sure, it's fine that back in their mind, they might think, this could be huge. We could make a lot of money. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with thinking that. But the point is, it can't just be about making money because making money is in and of itself empty. If it was, and some people get into like, hey, I want to be a bond trader or I want to be a stock trader. I just want to make a ton of money. I don't really care if I produce any value. Well, you can make money that way. I would say that you can't become very satisfied that way if that's all you're doing. I think a lot of people who I know who have made a lot of money by, for instance, becoming investment bankers. I talked to a lot of investment bankers when I was at Chipotle, when we were going public. And I learned that basically most of them were like, oh yeah, this is a terrible job. It's awful. But they made a lot of money doing it, some of them. And then we go, okay, now what do I do with this money to actually try to find a satisfying life? But, it would be nicer, it would be more fortunate to start the opposite, to start with doing something you think is wonderful, which also happens to help people, and therefore causes people to want to participate in it in a financial way, such as, signing onto Facebook and becoming a big platform, and now we can sell advertisement, and now we make money. But when Facebook first came out, it was not obvious initially how they were going to make any money, was it? It was a social media platform. How are you going to make money? If you're going to charge everyone $5 a month to be part of Facebook, that would have been one way to think about it, and not a stupid way. But it wouldn't have been as big a way as just, Facebook for years and years didn't make money. Amazon for years and years and years and years didn't make any money, right? It just became this giant thing that everyone loved and wanted to use and used every day. And then they could control information, sell data, and then sell more and more products, and then mark up the products a little bit more, and on and on and on. And now they become one of the biggest companies in the world. But it didn't start out making money. So anyway, I'm belaboring a point, but really the point is, if you follow your heart and what you really want to do, there's a lot of fertile soil there for you to grow something wonderful and the money will follow if it's something that's valuable to people.
Yeah, I really love that you genuinely care about people. I feel like you have great values. Going back to the personal development side, how do you adopt these values? As you mentioned in the book, values are hard to teach later on. Curious, how do you get those values or teach yourself early on in your life? Who is on your personal board of advisors? Who do you consult your business or life decisions with?
Wow. Well, I try to, I guess, again, starting with the last part, I don't really have a board of advisors, so to speak. I've got a lot of smart people that I know who are friends, who I trust, and I would call different people for different reasons. I usually call the person who I think will challenge me the most on that issue.
Really?
Yeah, oddly. It's kind of a little masochistic. But for instance, when I wrote my book, the people I first shared my book with, well, first of all, I shared my book with some people who I thought would help support my effort to continue writing it. But then as I got better, I thought, okay, now I'm going to start sharing it with some people who are just really tough critics and who can't possibly lie to me. I've got a few friends who they can't say something. They don't even know how to say something nice. They just, what they really believe comes blurting out of their mouth.
Gosh.
And so I sent it to them. And then when I got really positive feedback from really tough audience, I thought, hey, I'm onto something. This might be getting really good. So, but in terms of how I got my values, I think maybe I was just lucky to be born into a family that I think my parents had really good values. I think that I wasn't exposed to television, which I think has a lot of bad values on it. I wasn't exposed to a lot of things that might have caused me to value things that weren't valuable, if you want to say it that way. And I think also I just was very lucky to have some really amazing experiences when I was very young. For instance, in the book, I talk about my time at Dairy Queen. I ended up interacting with and really falling in love with all these, frankly, homeless people, many of whom had mental illnesses because they were from the mental health facility nearby my Dairy Queen. And I ended up falling in love with these people because they were beautiful people. And they were having, in most cases, I would say they were having what society would call very difficult lives. They didn't have any money. They usually didn't have friends or family that they really could relate to. They were often mentally ill. They were often depressed. They were hungry. They had almost every difficulty that you could have in society while still being sort of alive and well, if you will. And yet what I found in them was these beautiful people. They were beautiful. They had beautiful eyes. They had beautiful hearts. When I talked to them, I was like, oh my God, I love this person. And so very quickly what I learned is that what I really loved about a human being had nothing to do with, it had nothing to do with sort of anything that you think matters. It didn't have to do with them having any money because they were broke. It didn't have to do even with them being mentally well, because they weren't always mentally well at the moment. They were having a hard time. It didn't have to do with what home they owned, because these guys didn't have, and gals, women and men didn't have homes, And so what I learned is these people who had, quote unquote, and I say this in quotes, have had nothing. Okay. It turned out they had everything, because they had everything inside. They had a beautiful heart. They had curiosity. They had a desire for things to be better, a desire to grow and blossom. But they had, along the way, hit some very difficult obstacles: homelessness, drug abuse, mental illness, the death of family, loss of friendships, you name it, loss of jobs, loss of homes. They'd had all these quote unquote bad things happen to them. And I say quote unquote bad because I do not believe in the concept of bad or good. These are concepts I don't believe in. Bad or good. I think they're useless and dangerous and misleading concepts. So that's another, I could write a whole book on that. Maybe I should. It would be fun. But but
I would read it.
Yeah, thank you. So I learned from these people who had supposedly nothing. I learned that there was all this beauty inside. And I learned that when I saw that beauty and gave attention to them and asked them questions and brought curiosity to them, that they would blossom. They would physically sit up straighter. Their eyes would open more. They would smile more. They would actually become hungrier and want to eat. So I'd give them something to eat. They would become more ambitious. And by ambitious, what I mean is they would start to think that they can do things like, oh, you know what? I guess I can quit smoking cigarettes. I guess I can, start to get a habit of working a little bit and maybe earning some money and feeling the independence from having done so. Maybe I can find a place to live with some roommates that will help me, So they you could see that they very quickly started to see the possibilities that could exist for themselves that would improve their external circumstances. I emphasize the words external circumstances because there's this play in life of internal circumstances and external circumstances. So, or at least our internal state of wellness and our external circumstances. And people in society believe that there's a very tight relationship between external circumstances and our wellness. And it turns out that's not true. Okay, that's actually just not very true. And there are some incredible books that will tell you that. And I think one that comes to my mind is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, right? So in Man's Search for Meaning, he basically talks about people in the Holocaust during one of the most horrific times in human history, and how people found a way to find meaning and to give of themselves and to have hope and dedicate themselves to the wellness of the people around them. And in that context of this most horrible external circumstances, found a reason to find warmth, brilliance, and love inside themselves and the people around them. So, and there are also, you've heard stories about people in prison who are in prison. I mean, you'd think it can't get much worse than that. But within prison, they get educated. They find philosophical truth. They grow. They blossom. They write books. They become smarter. They get out of prison and then have a lot to give to the world. Or even if they don't get out of prison, they might have a lot to give to the world through their communication. So external circumstances really aren't what creates internal wellness. What creates internal wellness, I believe, is the practice of trying to, I wouldn't even, as soon as I say trying, it's not even right. The practice of acceptance, the practice of accepting who we are, the practice of accepting that things are as they are, and accepting that so that we can then be a positive beacon for change if we'd like to create change. But that act of trying to accept things and come to sort of a friendship with reality, okay, to understand the truth, to start to love the truth, to become a friend of reality, because if we're battling reality, we're losing, because reality is reality. We can't, if we battle it, we lose. If we don't believe the truth, it doesn't mean that it's not true, And so we have to sort of, I think, become friends with the truth, forgive the truth, forgive the things that hurt in us, forgive our own pain, forgive our inadequacies, forgive, so that we have a sense of acceptance of who we are, acceptance of the people around us. And from that acceptance grows compassion, understanding, love, wellness, and then ultimately empowerment, such that we can become a more powerful force for good or for change if we'd like to create change in the world.
I have to say, thank you so much for sharing all of these thoughts. I feel like I'm hearing it at the time that I should be hearing this. Curious, how did you come up with this way of thinking? I feel like not everyone is happy, especially successful people. There are a lot of stress coming out of work. Why do you think this way? Is it because of you don't watch TV?
No. I watch TV now. I watch TV and No, I think it's just, I'll tell you what, it's because I think the answer is I've always been very, very, very curious. I mean, I've been so curious that I've irritated people. My dad was irritated by me. I think my dad was irritated by me for years and years and years and years and years. It was only when he maybe became 50, 55, 60, and my father died at 75. But those last 10 or 15, 20 years, I really felt like he sort of loved me more. And I think he always loved me, but he was irritated by me. I think I'm probably a pretty irritating kid. I was too curious. I had too much energy. I was always asking questions. So I always had this hunger to understand the truth. I just want to know the truth. I want to know the truth even if I don't like it. I want to know the truth even if I don't understand it. I want to know it. I want to know it. I want to know it. And so I've always been super, super curious. And because I've been curious, I have looked for lessons everywhere and in everyone I've ever met and everywhere I've ever looked. I look for lessons. So when I was meeting those people at Dairy Queen, it sounds like I was maybe a kid being really nice to some people who were hard on their luck. And yes, that's true. But really, I was learning from people who had vast experience that I didn't have. I had never been homeless. I had never lost my family. I had never lost a loved one at that time, probably, or at least not many. I had never been without shelter. I'd never been hungry. I had never been, sort of demonstrably mentally ill. I was a young boy, I was a 15-year-old boy. I had it good, you might say. And I was so curious what it was like to have these hardships, how they came about, what decisions these people had made that led to them being in a difficult external circumstance, whether they'd change it if they could, what they believe now. And so I ask questions. And, I've also read books. I've read a lot of books on Eastern philosophy. I've read books on Christianity. I've read books on other religions. But in those books, I might read a big, thick book on something, and I might find a few things in it that I find, oh my gosh, that is so true. And I didn't know that. I didn't have that way of I didn't ever look at things in that way. So you get these aha moments throughout life of little bits of, oh my gosh, oh wow. And what really turns me on is knowing the truth. And so to me, it's like fresh air blowing over me when I understand the truth. Sometimes that truth is inconvenient. Sometimes it's, for instance, I'll tell you a very inconvenient truth to recognize is to say, wow, I think my dad, although he might have loved me, I think he didn't like me very much when I was a little kid. I walked hard on the floor. It pissed him off. I asked too many questions. It really pissed him off. His neck would tighten up when I got near him. I think he didn't like me much some of the time. That's really hard to realize. But if it's the truth, it still will help set you free. Because then what you can do is say, wow, he didn't really like me much. Then you can, of course, go, oh my gosh, why didn't he like me? And then you can say all the bad things about me. I walked too loud. I interrupted. I talked too much. I asked too many questions. Did I really ask too many questions? Or could I just say, my dad had a disposition such that it was difficult for him to handle, given his present state of mind. Maybe his marriage wasn't what he wanted it to be. Maybe he had internal demons that he was battling. Maybe he was depressed at times. Maybe he was upset. He had his own self-centeredness, like we all do, which made it very difficult for him to be a completely loving father to a vivaciously, incredibly curious, obnoxiously I shouldn't even pathologize myself like that. But to a kid who's got tons of questions, who's really curious and wants to ask questions and wants all of his dad's knowledge, it was too much for him. But since it was too much for him, I felt pain, and I still feel pain when I think about being rejected by my father. He didn't reject me and kick me out of the house. He didn't hit me. He didn't say I was a jerk, but his neck would stiffen. I could tell he didn't want me around sometimes. That hurt me. But it's true that he was doing the best he can as a father, probably. It was true that I was doing the best I could as a son. It's not that he did something wrong. He just did what he did. It's not that I did something wrong in reacting by being hurt. Of course, it's because I was a well-wired human that I was hurt. It should hurt if your dad doesn't like you, right? That should hurt. I mean, why shouldn't it? We're biologically trained to make sure our parents like us. Otherwise, they kick us out of the nest and we die. Every animal, not, whether it's a goose or a human, you want to make sure your parents take care of you. And so you adapt. You adapt in ways to try to cultivate acceptance by your parents such that they don't boot you out of the house and you freeze in the cold. I mean, at least that doesn't happen much in modern society because it's illegal, among other things. But still, you don't want to be rejected by your parents. But my point is, I've always searched for truth wherever I can find it. And where I saw something that wasn't true, I never took much solace in it. Like sometimes, for example, you might get someone who convinces themselves that they are other than as they are in order to try to feel better. That stuff didn't work for me. It didn't work I had to learn to come to accept myself, even though including that maybe I'm a bit irritating sometimes. I don't think it's okay for me to be irritating. I don't want to be irritating, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life punishing myself that maybe I was a bit irritating as a kid, asking my dad too many questions. So I had to kind of forgive myself for the sort of pain I caused myself by being irritating to my dad and causing his neck to stiffen up, Mm-hmm. But anyway, so if you're really looking for truth in the world and you really want to find it and you try really hard, there's lots of it out there. Now there's lots of things that aren't true too. But if you become a good filter of it, then you develop more and more and more, and I also wrote in journals my whole life. So I wrote and wrote and wrote. I did a lot of journaling. I haven't done it in the last 15 years, but before then I filled books and books and books and books of stuff, just writing stuff, since I was a little kid. I mean, 30 big, thick books full of writing. And so I was always writing about stuff. So it gave me a chance to really sort of, when you write something, it's more formal than if you just think it. And so I could sort of see my feelings as I wrote them. Do you know what I mean? And so I became more familiar with them.
Reflect.
And I could reflect and I could see patterns. And it's not that I even went back and read the book so often, but it's like, you remember, oh my gosh, I remember writing that before. I guess this isn't the first time I felt that. So, but anyway, I'm sort of rambling, but how did I get these values? I looked and looked and looked for the truth, and I found a lot of truth in my life. That's not to say I'm some arbiter of all things true, but I think that I have a very good grasp on reality. And the closer one gets to the truth, in my opinion, the more they become free. And because the truth to me is good.
That's deep.
Well, I told you, you saw in the book where I think that truth, love, and God are essentially the same thing. So I talk about that in the book. I think that the truth sort of at the end of the day, if you get rid of all the distractions, the truth is something really, really good. And I trust that. And so I want it. So I want the truth.
Wow. I feel like the conversation with you is even richer than just reading the book. As a reader, each person may pay attention to very different things from the book. When I was reading your book, I feel like I was getting a lot of great business advice, but our conversation helped me pay attention to the message that I was missing. I feel like how you think really shaped you into who you are today, and that makes you a better leader. Different audiences can be in drastically different situations, but the philosophy behind the thinking will guide us through all the situations.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm glad you're getting more out of the conversation. In a book, obviously, there's limitations. You want to be concise. But I really, to be honest, when I first wrote the book, it was more than twice as long as it ended up being. And my editor helped me cut it down a lot, which is great. But I wanted it to be concise. I didn't want it to be boring. And of course, there are many sentences in that book that if I could write a whole book about many of the sentences in that book. I mean, for sure, right? It's like, when I talk about truth, love, and God being basically the same thing, I could go, I'll
put it on there. So
no, it's great. It's wonderful. I can see it. I think that's really fun. But, I could go on and on and on and on and on about what that means, right? About really what that means. On and on. In fact, one of my maybe faults is I can go on and on about darn near anything probably in that book. But there's subjects that fascinate me. Even the concept I said earlier of there being good and bad, are not real things. Those aren't real. Those are human constructs to try to quickly label something much, much more complicated. If we think of a bad person, oh my God, that guy's a bad person. Well, that's totally an inaccurate description. And I don't even care how many bad, quote unquote, bad things that person's done. To say they're bad is obviously incomplete, right? Any person is a ball of trillions of cells and neurons that is vastly complicated. So there's no chance of describing anyone with one word, for starters, let alone describing anyone with a word that is so conclusive. And in fact, language generally, I think, is a very fortunate and very unfortunate tool. It's wonderful that we have language because I can say, I can say, Grace, could you please pass the ketchup? And you're going to probably pass me the ketchup. So that's very handy. And it's handy to say, Grace, I'm going to be home at 3:00. Would you be willing to help me at 3:00 till 4:00? Or we can do this podcast from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. So we can organize our lives, and it's handy. So language is very, very handy. But language is also very, very unfortunate because it's loaded with labels. In fact, every word is a label. Some more than others. For instance, the word Republican conjures in some people's minds a very negative association. The word Republican conjures in other people's minds a very positive association. In other people's minds, the word Republican conjures up something that's positive and negative and confusing and not complete. So that word is not a very helpful word because it doesn't, but if I say the word chair, again, even though it's a more focused word and everyone's going to probably picture some kind of chair when I say chair. So yeah, so if you were to say the word chair, you might picture a great big cushy, lazy boy. And someone else might picture an office chair and someone else might picture a small stool out, So again, the word is not, it's helpful, but it's not entirely accurate. So you can say that about any word. And certainly you can say that about language generally. So when we're saying words, we're gathering something from what the other person says, but we're not gathering exactly what they said, okay? Because they're saying these words meaning something different than what we're receiving. But because the limitations of language, because language is so limited, it brings more and more importance to curiosity, to questioning, to an open heart, to the desire to really understand the depth of the truth that's in this world, which is an incredibly complicated, nuanced, difficult thing to understand. So as human beings, all of us, I think, at some level, all of us have a curiosity for the truth, but some of us much more so, and some of us much less so. I happen to have a huge yearning for the truth, but to have a yearning for the truth is a bit scary because as you find the truth, it is often uncomfortable. The truth is, for us human beings, uncomfortable. I'll give you an example. None of us are getting out of this alive, right? We're all going to die and lose our physical body. That's uncomfortable, I think, to a lot of people. It is hard to trust that dying is just as positive as being born. We human beings think that being born is good and dying is bad. That's probably not true. Can't be true. We think that getting married is good and getting divorced is bad. Well, that's not true. And in fact, in that case, if someone comes up to you and says, hey, I'm getting married, you should probably say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, statistically. And when they say I'm getting divorced, you should say, oh, how wonderful, statistically. Why do I say that? Well, because more marriages end in divorce than not. And a lot of the ones that don't end in divorce still have negative things happening to them, like abuse, what have you, or people not helping each other or not wanting to support each other. But in divorce, 100% of the time, you're leaving a situation that you have concluded, or somebody has concluded, is bad, not good for you. So why do we say, oh, congratulations, you're getting married, but oh, I'm so sorry, you're getting divorced? Why do we say that? Marriage is uncertain and usually ends in divorce. Divorce always is because people are leaving a situation that they have been in and concluded is not good. And yet we don't say, congratulations, you're getting divorced. How wonderful. I mean, of course, it may sound absurd what I'm saying, but if you think about it, it's not absurd. Divorce shouldn't be something that we are more upset about than, of course, we all have a desire to get married and live happily ever after. And isn't that wonderful? And we love each other and it's great. And I'm not saying marriage isn't good. I'm not saying that. I've been married. I'm on my second marriage and I'm really happily married. My first marriage had lots and lots of things wonderful about it. It wasn't a bad thing. It became on balance something that, I guess didn't feel as good as I had hoped it would feel, but it wasn't bad. The point being, we always label things as good and bad, and we almost always get it wrong. Birth good, death bad. Wrong. Can't be true. And I can go into that for hours, but that's illogical, spiritually illogical. Doesn't make any sense. And then we think that we know what's good and bad for us. We don't. We think that if someone dies at 40, that's worse than if they lived till 45. Not necessarily true. All right. Because we don't know what, there's just too much we don't know to decide that our judgments about these things are correct. And so I guess I just question a lot of things. And through questioning it, you very quickly find that we humans, especially society's social values, are generally totally full of crap, full of baloney. It's just what we think is important really isn't what's important. What we think isn't important is, as often as not. So I think if you question all that and you really are curious about it, it's almost funny how silly we are, we human beings, as a race. We think wealth, fame, attractiveness are the most important things. They're not. People who are really, really good looking and really, really rich and really, really quote unquote successful in their careers don't tend to be happier than people who are broke, not quote unquote physically attractive to society as a whole. There's not a correlation there. People who are rich are not happier than people who are poor. That's not a real thing. So if we start looking at all these things that society says are important, buying a nice car doesn't make you happier. I actually went out and did that to try it. And I have a Tesla now and it's wonderful. I think it's a beautiful piece of engineering. I'm delighted by it. I keep buying Teslas because I think they're perfect sort of in almost every way. That's not to say you can't appreciate nice things. It's not to say that being in a nice house sometimes is like, oh, I like this house. It's a nice environment for me. It's not to say those things don't matter at all, but it's to say that those aren't what's going to, quote unquote, make you happy.
Well, I feel like having that mindset makes you stronger as a leader. I like that you're putting everything into perspective. You shouldn't be too happy about something when it's going well. Also not too sad about something when it seems bad. Speaking of leadership, I like your philosophy. Curious about by trade, what kind of leader do you think you are? Some are marketing leaders, some are sales leaders, some are product leaders. What technical skill do you think you bring to the table?
Well, I think I'm very, very numerate, so I'm good with numbers. Okay, so that's something useful. I don't know. I mean, any of the technical skills I have. I mean, look, I'm a very logical thinker. I'm trained as a lawyer. I'm really good with numbers. I'm a good math guy. I'm very logical. I'm very quick to make decisions. I tend to make good decisions because I tend to be able to analyze a whole bunch of information and very quickly decide what's the best way to go. I'm good. I think I've got the skill of being able to, convince people that the right way to go is the right way to go, and I have a really good way of getting people behind me to go there. And so I'm really good at I think galvanizing a whole large group of people in one direction, such that we're all paddling in the same direction. So, but really, the thing that matters most about me as a leader is that I have an enormous compassion and love for human beings. I understand them and want them to be at their best. I can't stand it when I see someone who is not doing the best with what they've got. Okay, and so and I also really love them. And so since I love them and I want them to be at their best, and I can see a better way for them to be at their best, I tend to be a really helpful advocate to help people be the best version of themselves. That's the thing that matters more than anything else. And yes, I think it helps that I'm numerate. I think it helps that I'm logical. I think that helps that I'm a smart person. That I can read very quickly. I can, I couldn't always read quickly. I've just read so darn much. Eventually I had to get good at it. So I've gained a lot of skills along the way. I've read a lot. I've thought a lot. I spend my whole life trying to become wiser and trying to become more knowledgeable and to see what's really true. And I can bring those things that I've learned to help in certain situations, for instance, leadership situations, or to help a problem that a company has. So I tend to be able to very quickly, I guess recently one of my good friends, who I think is one of the smartest people I know, and he actually worked with me at Chipotle. I said, well, why do you keep asking me to help you? What do you think is so strong about me as a leader? He goes, oh man, that's easy. He goes, you're the person who can go into a room and find a super complicated situation and right away net out what the problem is. It's like you find the issue really quickly. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. Well, that was one of the things that in law school you had to do. In law school, you had to look through, these long fact patterns and find out basically what's the issue. Like what's the legal issue that's going to be the tough issue? There's a lot of obvious stuff, but what's going to be the tough issue? I would quickly find that tough issue. So I think that there are some ways that my mind works that's very, very logical, and my mind is very quick to dismiss the things that I think are not the issue. And so if I hear people in a meeting, for example, talking about a bunch of things that aren't the issue, I'll say, guys, that's not even the issue. I've got no patience for something that is not the issue. I've got no patience for something that's not going to help us resolve the problem. In fact, I can be annoying in that way, I think, because sometimes I'm like, stop. Why are we talking about all this stuff that's irrelevant? That's not relevant. Let's get to what's relevant. And here's what's relevant. So I think my speed at finding the relevant point helps me to solve the relevant point. And also I'm just fast at making decisions because I hate being slow at making decisions. And so, and also I believe that making, 100 decisions, using the information you have in front of you and making the best decisions you can, and taking some risk of being wrong by making them quickly is better than making, 3 correct decisions that are 100% correct. It's better to make 100 decisions that are 95% correct, because if you make a decision that's wrong, you can unmake it. You can make a new one to go from there. So, and I talk about that in the book, The Power of Decisiveness, how usually we know before all the information is in what's going to happen. We know the answer. We don't need all the information. We need a large enough set of information to go, okay, I think I know where this is going.
All right. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. In the next episode, we'll focus on how Monty navigated his career and leadership at Chipotle. Don't forget to come back on Wednesday for the second part of the conversation with Monty. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tips from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are Grace Gong GG. Besides LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know what you thought about the show. Now you can also listen to a Smart Venture podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click the YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.